If you look at the north central part of the United States map, what do you see? That's right, nothing. This patch of nothing is split into two states, North and South Dakota. These states really don't contain much, and they aren't that different. If I randomly drop you in North Dakota, you're going to see a field. If I randomly drop you in South Dakota, you're also going to see a field. So what if we just get rid of this line? What changes? Is the only difference us seeing one empty state instead of two? Or do we have this powerhouse of a state emerge from this massive void of nothingness? So welcome to the new state of Dakota. Sit back and relax while I give you the grand tour of this ever so vast state. Normally, these types of videos will start with some sort of history of the region, which I will do, but I figured I'd get right to the exciting part and showcase the impressive stats of this state. That is, if you find nothing impressive. Of course, there are several people who would argue that there is indeed something, as they themselves do exist, even if they do live on a plane of nothingness. These Dakotans are great in number, with a population of 1,665,761 people. This population is so great that they are larger than 9 whole states in terms of population, 10 if you count Washington, D.C. Just don't tell them that there are 50 states. We then head towards the amount of nothingness the state of Dakota contains, and let's just say that Dakota contains a lot of nothing, allowing it to have a total area that is just barely edging its neighbor, Montana, for the 4th most in the country. For an international comparison, that's 2,000 square miles larger than Japan. However, I do have to admit something. Because of worldwide inflation, nothing is now worth something, which gives the great state of Dakota a GDP of $114.32 billion, ranking it 37th in the nation, just under Mississippi. Wait, Mississippi has money? This ranking gives Dakota a GDP per capita of, wait a second. Let me do some long division real quick. Carry this, carry that, move that guy over. A GDP per capita of $68,629, which makes it the 12th richest state, just between Maryland and Illinois. I guess nothing really is now worth something. After all of this, you may be convinced that this state may not have that much nothing after all. So here's the stats that will prove you otherwise. Density. Combined Dakota has a population density of 11.259 people per square mile, making it 46th in the country, with only 3 states with a lower population density. So yeah, that's a lot of nothing. But maybe you want to live in all of this nothing. How much is it going to cost you? Well, it's going to put you down by about $36,323 on average, which doesn't look like a bad deal, as it ranks the state as the 35th most expensive place to live in, or the 15th cheapest if you're more of a glass half full type of guy. But this is what the basic stats of Dakota would look like. Few people, a giant area, a slightly above average amount of wealth based in a small economy, but also relatively cheap to live in. Let us now look at the history of the void of nothingness that is combined Dakota. More specifically, why are they 2 states to begin with, and what would have to change for them to be one singular state? So, for a very long time, Native American tribes would call this place home, before being forcefully removed from this land. The first European power to claim this land was France. The first major historical event to occur here would be the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, where the French sold this land to the US. Next, the United States acquired the southernmost part of Rupert's Land for Britain in 1818, justifying the United States' northern boundary as being at the 49th parallel. This is also the northernmost boundary of Dakota. As a territory of the United States, Dakota was a part of the following territories in this order. First as a part of the Louisiana Territory, then as a part of Missouri, then Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, and Nebraska. Then finally, by 1861, Dakota had enough of being a hot potato and finally became its own territory, initially comprising of the two Dakotas, as well as land going all the way to what is now Idaho. Over the next several years, both Idaho and Wyoming will split off from Dakota, leaving it with what it is today. Now we have the issue of why Dakota is two states instead of one. The answer, just like everything else, is politics. The northern and southern half of the Dakota Territory always felt separated, whether it was just local attitudes or a lack of transportation. The northern cities were connected to Minnesota by rail, while the southern cities were connected to Nebraska. Since there was no rail lines connecting the northern and southern parts, there was a lack of unity in this territory. So in the 1880s, when the state became qualified for statehood, the question of how that would be done remained just that, a question. So this left the decision to Congress, who could turn Dakota into one Republican state or two. And I think you can guess who held Congress at that time. So in this video, we'll just assume that a few elections went the other way, or some other compromises were made. The point is that Dakota is now admitted as a singular state. So that is how the grand old state of nothing exists. But let's dive into our new state of Dakota and see what exactly is in the nothing. So let's not waste any time and dive into the smallmouth stuff in this new state. But before I do, maybe you should consider subscribing if you like this content. It would go a long way with this channel, and you'd get to see more of my stuff. Back to the video. Now first, I'll show you how the population is distributed. Then I'll talk about the economy before diving into the national parks/landmarks, and of course, the sports scene. In order to view how the population here is distributed, we'll start by viewing the 10 largest cities in this new state. The largest city would be Sioux Falls, with a population of just over 200,000, followed by Fargo with a population of around 130,000. The rest of the cities go down in population considerably, as the next city is Rapid City at just under 80,000, Bismarck at just over 75,000, Grand Forks at just under 60,000, Minot at just under 50,000, West Fargo at just over 40,000, then Aberdeen, Williston, and Dickinson at just under 30,000. It may look like the people are in North Dakota, but South Dakota has 10 additional cities between 10 and 25,000, while North Dakota only has 2, all of which are at the following locations on the map. Also, I think Bismarck would be the capital of a combined Dakota, since it is centrally located. Was already a capital city, was the initial planned capital for a combined Dakota, and is still among the largest cities in the state. Of the 22 cities in combined Dakota, with a population of over 10,000, 13 of these cities lie in the easternmost 30% of these states, while 3 of the other cities are in the Rapid City metro and 2 are in the Bismarck metro. This leaves a large area with very few people. Another way to view the population skew is that 40% of the state lives in the county bordering the eastern border. The reason for the greater population could be better farmland and agriculture on the eastern side, as with most places, that's pretty much the reason why anybody lives anywhere. Or it could be that Interstate 29, which goes along the Red River, provides easy transportation up and down the easternmost side of the state, thus facilitating more growth. Either way, a significant population lives in the easternmost part of the state. So what do these people do? What jobs are popular here? What makes up the economy of the state? The largest industry would be oil drilling and gas extraction. This is due to a significant amount of energy resources in North Dakota. The industry is so big that it would still be the largest moneymaker in the state, despite being non-existent in South Dakota. Meanwhile, the second largest contributor is incredibly present in both sides of the state, that being corn, wheat, and soybean farming, which makes sense because all you can see in this state is miles upon miles of fields. The third and last major contributor is credit card issuing, which is only present in South Dakota. This is because the state has several laws that are incredibly friendly towards banks. So we'll just assume that combined Dakota also has these laws too. Now we have where people are and what they do for a living. Let's see if there's anything actually interesting here. Well, of course, there's their most famous landmark, Mount Rushmore, which is the only reason why people might actually know the state exists. However, there are 3 national parks here too. You have Theodore Roosevelt in the north, and Badlands and Wind Cave in the south, which accumulates in 3 national parks for the state, tied for 5th most with Arizona, Washington, and Florida. Not bad for being the state of nothing. Lastly, Since I'm like 70% sports YouTuber now, let me talk about the sports scene in this state. The Dakotas have 4 Division I colleges, and all of them are at the FCS level, despite all of them playing at FBS caliber in football. The colleges are North Dakota, North Dakota State, South Dakota, and South Dakota State. But remember, we have 1 Dakota, so these colleges need a slight tweaking to their names. First, we have Northern Dakota replacing North Dakota University. That way, we don't have to change the logo, and they are the northernmost college at Grand Forks. Then we can do the exact same thing by replacing South Dakota with Southern Dakota, for the exact same reason as Vermillion, South Dakota is right on the Nebraska border. Now we'll change North Dakota State and South Dakota State into the University of Dakota and Dakota State respectively. I decided this as 1, their logos don't indicate their state as much, and 2, they're much closer to the middle. I gave Dakota plain to North Dakota State University, as their student population was slightly larger, and I don't know why, but I just kind of wanted to use that basis. So, we know the teams that people here would root for, but which sports would be popular here? Most likely, hockey and football, as that is what these colleges are good at, and they're also in the north central region of the United States. And there is no sports scene here outside of college football or hockey, as this state would have 0 pro sports teams. But for those who do follow pro sports, I just assume that people here would lean towards the Minnesota teams, since they are by far the closest to these states. Maybe this state does have a few things after all. So hopefully you like this, and what are your thoughts? Would a combined Dakota work today? Personally, I don't think there would be too much of a difference, but do you disagree? Feel free to post your opinion in the comments below. Thank you and have a great day.